We're back after the weekend. It's weather for Weather Geeks time here on this Monday evening. A busy, busy day in the weather department today with the heat and the storms. The heat is our week-long story, but also we can't forget about the possibility of some thunderstorm activity. But before the thunderstorms erupted this afternoon, we did put into the books our first 90-degree temperature of the year. 91 officially at the airport at 140 this afternoon. The temperature would have been a little bit warmer had those storms not bubbled up and rolled over Vienna, where the airport is, of course, by mid-afternoon. And those storms certainly meant some business. Based on some of the videos and pictures we've seen of the damage, especially in Trumbull County and over into Mercer County, wouldn't be surprised if we had some downburst winds or straight-line winds of 60 miles per hour plus. There were no tornadoes. Conditions were not conducive to tornadic activity today, but certainly these storms packed a lot of wind. You know, there was so much heat and humidity in the atmosphere today that despite a ridge of high pressure kind of being our dominant weather feature in the east, the heat and the humidity enough to overcome that, and these storms got tall enough that they got into the sub-freezing air and produced some hail, and some of that energy aloft got pulled down to the surface in the form of strong winds. So we had trees down, power lines down, and quite a bit of damage in some spots from southern parts of Trumbull County over into parts of western Mercer County in particular. We had some heavy storms in some other parts of our area, but less in the way of problematic damage and things like that. Now, as of this recording at 7 o'clock, the weather's a lot quieter. We had one cluster of storms that perked up a little while ago back towards Carrollton and towards Mineral City in northeastern Tuscarawas County. Salineville can have a little thunderstorm, but this is pretty garden variety. I'm not expecting any more severe weather locally for the night tonight. Now, we do have some rain-cooled air overhead. The temperature dropped into the 70s. It's been kind of hanging out there officially at the airport over the last couple of hours, but the heat index has touched 100 in much of the lower Great Lakes in the Ohio Valley today, including places such as Cincinnati and Lexington. Up towards Detroit, Columbus got pretty close to the century mark in terms of the heat index this afternoon. Heat advisory is now out for the entire week, all the way through Friday for our area. And you know, in our part of the country, the National Weather Service will generally issue a heat advisory when the heat index is expected to be pretty close to 100 degrees. Of course, this varies by region. A 100-degree heat index is nothing all that unusual in Charleston, South Carolina, or even Atlanta, Georgia, down into Florida, of course. But a heat index pretty close to 100 in eastern Ohio and western PA. That is, that's enough to trigger a heat advisory. And again, that heat advisory is in effect right through Friday evening. Wouldn't be surprised if they had to extend that into parts of the weekend. All right, the heat index. Basically a measure of what your body kind of thinks the temperature is. It's almost kind of the summertime equivalent to the wind chill in the winter season. Our bodies try to cool themselves off through evaporative cooling. In other words, we sweat, and the evaporation of that sweat off of your skin, it acts just like air conditioning, and that evaporative cooling is how our body tries to regulate its temperature. Well, when it's really humid, that sweat does not evaporate as efficiently, and your body has to work harder to keep you cool. And so on a day like today, before the storms rolled through, when you have a dew point close to 70 and an air temperature close to 90, that creates a heat index of 96 degrees or so. That's basically how your body thinks the temperature, how high your body thinks the temperature is based on how it has to work in order to keep yourself cool. We'll be pretty close to the 100-degree mark at times, especially if we don't have any storms that roll over during the mid part of the afternoon over the next few days. One other way of measuring heat stress, and this is kind of an experimental product, but the Weather Enterprise is starting to move a little bit away from the heat index and going more towards the wet bulb globe temperature. It's kind of a mouthful, but basically we think it's probably a better representation of the stress on your body because this wet bulb globe temperature factors in more than just the temperature and the humidity in the shade. This accounts for being in direct sunlight, what the sun angle is, what the wind speed and gusts are, in addition to humidity and things like that. And also cloud cover is factored in. And Tuesday's wet bulb globe temperature values of upper 80s to around 90, we consider that to be in the high range. And so anyone exerting themselves outdoors, working outdoors, exercising outdoors, you're going to have to take more frequent breaks and stay a little more hydrated than usual. And of course, in this kind of a prolonged heat wave, we have to be cognizant of the fact that there's some portions of the population that are less fortunate than others. Some people don't have air conditioning. And this stretch of hot weather will offer very little relief to those folks at night. I don't think we'll break any daily records this week. We're not going to see 100 degrees as far as the air temperature this week. And, I've seen a lot of, cranky comments on social media over the last handful of days. Of course, anytime it gets hot, we see this sort of thing where it's, the crowd comes out saying, oh, this is just summer, no big deal. A lot of hype over nothing. It's summer, it's supposed to get hot. But, this is unusual. Not the daily temperatures necessarily, but the length of the heat wave and the lack of relief at night. It's been a long time since we've had a 6-day heat wave in our area. It's been since 1995. That was in August. A 7-day heat wave, which will be possible if we hit 90 on Sunday, because it seems pretty likely we'll hit 90 each of the next several days. And assuming that we do, if we have 90 all the way through Sunday, that would be 7 days in a row. It's been since that really hot summer of 1988. And actually, it's been since the 1940s since we've had a 7-day heat wave in the month of June. Of course, heat waves are a little more common in July and even into August, and not so much in June. So this is unusual. It's not just run-of-the-mill stuff. Chances are, if you're watching this deep into this video, you're weather savvy enough and science savvy enough to know those things. But it is funny how many of those comments we tend to see on social media. All right, we'll do it again on Tuesday. Very little in the way of change. Thunderstorms are going to try to bubble up, and the same recipe as today goes for Tuesday, in that many places will stay dry, but if you do get a thunderstorm, it may not be just a garden variety storm. It'll be possible that that storm gets tall enough to bring down some hailstones and a gust of wind as well, even though the coverage may be somewhat limited. Not much to show you on Futurecast over the next few days, because what you see is what you get. A likely dry morning followed by isolated storms in the afternoon. We'll do it again Wednesday, and we'll do it again on Thursday. We don't have any large-scale weather features heading our way until the very end of the weekend, or maybe even early next week, sometime Sunday into Sunday night or maybe Monday. We do have a cold front heading our way. This is a look at the jet stream. Our ridge, responsible for all the heat, kind of flexes its muscles right through the end of the week, but it will get smushed as we go into the weekend by a pretty healthy little disturbance aloft that will carve out a little bit of a trough. This will drag a cold front through the region later in the weekend, maybe into Monday, and the heat ridge will get, kind of shunted or squished off to our south and west, at least temporarily. I think that respite early next week will be fairly temporary, though, because, while we may see a couple of days with highs in the lower 80s in the wake of that front, the heat's going to try to build back in as we go towards the end of next week and the end of June. So today's Climate Prediction Center 8 to 14 day outlook, basically the last week of June, shows pretty high odds of above average temperatures, not only locally, but in much of the country, with the exception of the Pacific Northwest. And if you paid attention to our seasonal forecast a few weeks ago, the summer forecast, we are expecting a pretty hot summer. There's a chance it will be the hottest summer of the century so far. Now, we've had some hot summers of late, 2016, 2018, 2020, into 2021, all pretty hot, 2 degrees or more. The summer of 2005 was also about 2 degrees warmer than the average. Now, we had some cooler summers back in the 2000s, but they've been few and far between in recent years. Last year, an exception. We had a little bit of a cool summer last year. But there's a chance we end up more than 2.5 degrees above the average for this summer, which would make it our hottest summer so far in the 21st century, and maybe one of our hottest summers on record. And I mentioned this on Weather Geeks last week. I think on a global scale, at least in the northern hemisphere where it's summer, we have a chance of seeing the hottest summer on record as far as northern hemisphere temperatures in June, July, and August. Well, of course, we'll have you covered with any thunderstorms that pop up on Tuesday with the latest information on social media and our newscasts. Be sure and tune in to Weather for Weather Geeks during the rest of the week for an update on the short range and our latest long range thoughts as well. Have a great rest of your Monday night, and thanks as always for watching.